Good morning. Good morning.
You know, about 2 months ago, my husband was, when we were working on the schedule for guest speakers, my husband was supposed to speak today instead of me. And around that time, I had chosen a day to speak in April, and I had chosen the topic of forgiveness. Now, as often happens, you know, when you intend to do something, the universe responds by giving you all sorts of opportunities to reevaluate and revise the subject you're going to be talking about. And then my husband Marco had to go on a trip this weekend, and I said, well, I'll take your day. And I'm really glad I did it, because I don't think I could have handled another 2 months of being reminded of all the issues around forgiveness. So my talk today is titled The Path to Forgiveness, Everything I Needed to Learn About Forgiveness I Learned from a Mosquito. And as you can probably, if you have ever come across this viral email called All I Really Need to Know About I Learned in Kindergarten, All I Really Need to Know About Life I Learned in Kindergarten by Robert Feng. And the story of this is that he wrote this little poem, and he sent it out to all his friends, and then it became viral. And an editor in New York thought this was so good, she wanted to meet the author, and she decided to track him down. Took her a while, because it was just a viral email that she had gotten. And then she asked him, well, if you have anything else that you have written, I would like to publish it. And he did, actually. He wrote essays and poems as a hobby. And so I'm going to start by reading to you, the wisdom from kindergarten. And his name is, again, Robert Feng, and this is an excerpt from the book. All I really need to know, I learned in kindergarten. All I really need to know about how to live and what to do and how to be, I learned in kindergarten. Wisdom was not at the top of the graduate school mountain, but there in the sand pile at Sunday school. These are the things that I learned. Share everything. Play fair. Don't hit people. Put things back where you found them. Clean up your own mess. Don't take things that aren't yours. Say sorry when you hurt somebody. Wash your hands before you eat. Flush. Warm cookies and cold milk are good for you. Lead a balanced life. Learn some and think some and draw some and paint and sing and dance and play and work every day some. Take a nap every afternoon. I wish. When you go out into the world, watch out for traffic, hold hands and stick together. Be aware of wonder. Remember the little seed in the styrofoam cup. The roots go down and the plant goes up, and nobody really knows how or why, but we're all like that. Goldfish and hamsters and white mice and even the little seed in the styrofoam cup, they all die, so do we. And then remember the Dick and Jane books, and the first word you learn, the biggest word of all, look. And so this was the poem that went to millions of computers all over the United States and throughout the world. And I want to share with you another story that he wrote in that book that they published. And it was sort of a Christmas forgiveness story. Robert, he loves holidays, especially Christmas, and which is his favorite holiday. So every year, he sent out Christmas cards real early, because he figured if he remembered everybody early, nobody would forget him. And then he would receive all this plentiful mail with Christmas cards and good wishes from everybody. Remind him of his address and that he existed, So every year he did this, and he had great success, except for this one year, when there was a whole group of people that just plain forgot him. And he was so hurt by this that he spent the first 3 months of the next year resenting that they forgot him for Christmas. How can they be true friends to him when they send them a Christmas card or a message and they did not? So around March, early spring, he decided, he was staying home, he was off work for a couple of days, he decided he was going to tackle the attic and declutter. So he climbed up in the attic, and he decided he was going to start with Christmas ornaments and things so that he could let go of all the things that he didn't like anymore, so he could buy new things for the new Christmas in that year. So he opens up one box, and there it was, a stack of mail, still with the rubber bands the postman puts on them. So apparently what had happened is that somebody wrote in the mail, not him, and then Christmas things got piled on top of that. And that was a stack of mail that he never got to read. And it was already March. So every single person who had been resented for the last 3 months had actually sent him a card or a letter. And so he went in the backyard, he got out the lawn chairs, he took a big stereo and a CD with Christmas carols, a bottle of tequila, made some margaritas, and he decided he was going to spend the rest of the day just listening to Christmas carols, having a belated Christmas celebration with his friends that he thought had forgotten him. So then a neighbor, a stay-at-home mom that was his neighbor, they had known each other for many years, she said, "What are you doing?" And so he told her, and so she came over with snacks. And he got the pleasure of not just reading the cards, but reading them to somebody else and having the opportunity of telling the story of how he met these people and what they meant in his life. Of course, then came the painful process of starting to rebuild all the relationships he had let become sour during those 3 months because he thought they had forgiven him. So he had wasted 3 months of his life being resentful towards people who were actually kind to him. And that shows us that just like we can love another and not be corresponded, we can also be angry or resentful of somebody else and not be corresponded. So, when I sometimes like to think of the human life as a movie, and every movie has a script. And when people are going to do, say like there's a famous person and somebody has written a biography about them, you want to make a movie about them, you could, depending on what scenes you choose, it could be a drama, it could be a thriller, it could be a comedy. Isn't that so? Because you cannot possibly in 2 hours put all of the life of a person. So you would choose your scenes. And every good movie has some kind of a villain in itself. And sometimes the villain is just an adversity, like poverty, lack of opportunities, a handicap. But more often, most movies, that adversity comes from a villain that is actually a person. And if you take out the villain from that story, then it's not such an interesting story anymore. And we all like to see the moment in the movie when there's triumph over that adversity or over the adversity that was created by life or by that person. So, I think most people, when they think about their life, can identify the person that has become the villain, or who was the villain in their life, the person they need to forgive the most. As some of you know, in I practice Feng Shui and I talk with clients a lot during consultations, sometimes that villain that people need to forget is a person that interacted with them one time for just a few months. For example, an art teacher that told a child that their drawing was horrible and that they would never be an artist. And that person has carried that pain throughout their lives. And other times it's situations of abuse at home and other circumstances that extended for long periods of time. But if you think about the person that you feel you need to forgive or that you have felt before you needed to forgive the most in your life, it's probably the person that you once loved very much or someone that hurt somebody you love or loved very much. I have a friend who lost a sister, and her sister was driving in a town and she was hit by a drunk driver. And so we were talking some time ago about the pain that she felt one time when she went to the Dogwood Arts Festival, and she saw the man who had killed her sister, not intentionally, of course, when he was drunk, he made a mistake. But she saw him walking through the fair with his family, having an ice cream and looking like he was very happy. And she felt she was struck by this feeling that there was such an unfairness about life, that a person could cause so much damage to a family and still go on to live a happy life in his own family. And one of the things we talked about at that time is that we don't actually know what the life of this person has been since then. We don't know if he's able to sleep at night. We don't know if he has developed any stress-related illnesses. We don't know how much guilt he feels. We don't know how much he worries about his children when they go out. He might be haunted by the feeling that he's going to be punished sometime for what he did. So even though we may think there's an unfairness in life, life sort of an equalizer. There's a TV show, I'm originally from Ecuador, and my original language is Spanish. So sometimes I'll watch programs because they help me not forget my original language, which, believe it or not, can happen. So there's this talk show, and it's sort of a blend between Oprah and Montel. And the anchor of this show is a Mexican lady who has a PhD in psychology, and she used to have a private practice before she went into TV. And there was this one episode where there was a father who was asking for the forgiveness of his grown children. When they were small and the father lived with them and their mother, he was an alcoholic and he was very abusive to them all. They were terrified of him. The marriage ended and this man hit rock bottom, after which he converted to another religion. He joined Alcoholics Anonymous and he changed his life around. He quit drinking, he got remarried, he started another family, and apparently became an example of a husband and a wife with a second chance. And now, part of the 12-step program is that you seek forgiveness, you make amends and reconciliation with the people you have hurt before. So he wanted to find reconciliation with the children from his original marriage, but they were not interested. So he had come to the show with the hopes that they would give him a second chance with that family. So this Mexican TV lady shared her personal experience. So she had a similar situation where when she was a little girl, her father was very abusive to her mother, to herself, and the other siblings. And then they got divorced, and same story. He turned his life around, he remarried, and he had a new wonderful family. So his original family received all the bad that was in him, and the second family received all the good that was in him. Now, she was an adult, she had a PhD, she was a TV personality, and for those of you who do not know this, in Mexico, famous people walk around with bodyguards, because there's lots of kidnappings and things. So, but she said, she was walking down the street and somebody came to her and told her that her father was around the corner. Her body would go into fight and flight mechanism. She could not control it. She would start trembling. So there seems to be that when a person is still afraid of somebody, it becomes very hard to forgive. When somebody feels like they're still being hurt by the actions of another, it seems that there's a barrier to forgiveness. So, why forgive? What is the value in forgiving? Because if we all behave like that poem, everything I needed to learn about life I learned in kindergarten, it wouldn't be an issue. We would only hurt other people by mistake or by chance. We would apologize promptly. We would take steps to amend our mistakes. If we lost somebody's trust, we would understand there's going to be some time before we can regain their trust. But life is not like that. A lot more people behave according to what they learned in the locker room of high school than what they learned in the sandbox in Sunday school, like he says. And we also can tell that there's some people who tend to be more resentful than others. There's some people who hold grudges, and other people who tend to forget things and just forgive more easily. So there seems to be constitutions that are more prone to resentment. And certainly, I'm sure you have met people who take care of their resentment, who nurture it, and who take care that that resentment, instead of being reduced over time, grows over time. Somebody told a group that I was working with, those moments in life where you always remember where you were, like you remember where you were when you first learned about 9/11. I was in Mississippi and I had flown there to do work for a company. And I was also doing a Feng Shui workshop. And so this workshop was just a few days after 9/11. And people were talking about how unhappy they felt and how resentful, how vengeful and hateful they felt, how they wanted to enlist and go hurt the people who had hurt the country. And somebody said the phrase that I have heard repeated many times since then, which is that being resentful, revengeful, holding grudges is like drinking poison and then waiting for the other person, your enemy, to drop dead. And that made an impact. The first time I heard about it, that really made an impact. I'm going to read to you, in the Science of Mind, there are 10 core concepts that sort of define all that we believe about how the universe was designed and how it works. And one of those 10 principles or core concepts is forgiveness. And this is the short form of the core concept of forgiveness in Science of Mind. In the eternal now, there can be no place for divine anger, unforgiveness, or punishment. If we perceive a need for forgiveness, this is a human condition. Human forgiveness is the process that frees us to live in the eternal now. It is the essential step before real spiritual growth can flourish. Science of Mind teaches that the ultimate goal of life is complete emancipation from all discord of every nature, and that this goal is sure to be attained by all. That's very pretty, isn't it? So, what happens when we forgive? By forgiving, we take back the power we gave to the world to give us harm. By forgiving, we release ourselves and the one who has hurt us from the prison of our resentment. By forgiving, we free ourselves to live in the eternal now without holding on to the past. By forgiving, we acknowledge the Christ, the perfection within ourselves and the offender. So, this was going to be the conclusion of my lecture before life started hitting me with all these revisions on the concept of forgiveness, resentment, holding grudges, getting past things. And I'm going to share with you what all the things that got stirred up since 2 months ago when I decided to do this. There's a French writer that is from the time of the existentialist, the middle of the 20th century. And his name is spelled Borisvian. And my friend who speaks French, she says it's pronounced something like Boris Vian. And he has a book that is called The Fall in Beijing. Only it doesn't happen in fall, and it doesn't happen in Beijing either. The story happens in an imaginary country called Mesopotamia. And there's a multitude of strange characters. It's sort of like Kurt Vonnegut's style of writing. And there's 4 characters in this story that is a similar story to A Midsummer Night's Dream. But basically there are 2 guys in this case who are in love with one of the women. And the women correspond to the love of one of them. The one that doesn't feel that his love is returned can't stand the jealousy, the bitterness, and as time goes on, this hatred grows within him towards his friend that is the beneficiary of this woman's love. And they're both engineers, and they're working in some kind of mine, and there's this, it's sort of like a well-type dugout that they have to go in, and they have to come out climbing a really tall ladder. So this one time they're coming out, and this man is coming out first. And his friend is behind him. And his friend, as they're about to get out of this hole, his friend sort of loses grip with one hand. And he turns around and looks at his friend, who for some strange reason was called Anna. And instead of helping him, he releases his other hand from the ladder. And his friend plummets down to the bottom of this hole and dies. So then he goes looking for a priest for confession. And he says, forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. And this was an abbot. And the abbot says, what have you done? What is the problem? And he said, I killed my friend Anna. And he tells him the story of how it happened. And the abbot says, the way I see it, you simply release him from the ladder. He killed himself when he hit the rocks. So, this is, the reason I'm sharing with you this story is that a couple of months ago when I had the sense that I wanted to do this talk about forgiveness, I got in touch with a group of people I know that have much to forgive. This large group of people were the victims of a hate crime. And so I wrote to them and I asked, how are you with this 3 years later? How are you feeling with this? Have you forgiven the person who did this? And there was a multitude of responses about that, from the person who said they would never be able to forgive because the pain was too great and so many people had died. And other people said that they don't need to forgive because they never took offense. They never took it personal. They understood this person was a sociopath, and they never took it personal, so they don't have a need to forgive. I also learned, when I was doing this little research of my own, that there's something called the proud offender. Because in the usual relationship with another person, if you do something that hurts them, either that you meant it or it was a mistake, and you immediately say you apologize, if you take steps to make amends, and if you work over time to gain their trust back, then there's hardly going to be any conflict. But sometimes people will not recognize that they have done something to hurt another. And there's also the proud offender, the person who feels good about what they did, the person who would do it again. And that puts the whole subject of forgiveness in a whole different light. Like one person told me, why should I forgive? You forgive somebody who says, I'm sorry. But this person has never said, I'm sorry, so why does it even come up as an issue that we should forgive this person? And there were also some responses in tune with the law of attraction, the Conversations with God series, or the Course in Miracles. And coming from the belief that we create our own realities and therefore must accept responsibility for anything that happens to us. Though I agree that we are co-creators of our own realities because our thoughts generate decisions and our decisions lead to actions that continue to shape our lives. But we coexist with 6 billion other extremely equally powerful people like us who are also creating their own realities and intermingle with us. Goodness, what was that? And sometimes realities are created by the force of the group, and we find ourselves, our lives, being moved in certain directions that we didn't intend to go because of these forces. And it's just about, when a person has experienced some deep trauma, one of the worst things you could actually tell them is that they are responsible for what happened because they created their own reality. Even though this may be true in an absolute realm, in a relative term, it's a very hurtful thing to tell a person who has suffered greatly. But this also, because the person who has been victimized by somebody else, when you add this factor and they start saying, am I at fault for this? Did I cause it? Did I create it? Did I allow it? And so this made me, when I was reading these responses to my question that I had posed to this group, I was reminded of this story, of the engineer killing his friend, and then the priest telling him that he merely separated him from the ladder, and the other guy killed himself when he hit the rocks. I was reminded of that. So these responses that say, why do you choose to be offended by what this other person did to you? Start by forgiving yourself for choosing to be offended. There is a similar one to that which says, forgive others for that which they never actually did to you, because all of life is an illusion anyway, so nobody has done anything to you, you have nothing to forgive. So the question is pain an illusion, right? Did we just make it up? Do we harm ourselves by how we choose to react to the harmful actions or words of others? Do we choose to hit the rocks when someone throws us off the ladder? We could have chosen something different, right? So I have heard someone speaking about the subject use the expression cheap forgiveness. Have you guys ever heard of that, cheap forgiveness? And cheap forgiveness is that forgiveness that comes too easily, before the consequences of an action have actually even sunk in. Forgiveness that is in a way denial of the person's own dark feelings. One of the main definitions of the verb to forgive, what to forgive means, is that you stop being angry at someone who has hurt or offended us. But in order to stop being angry, what do you have to do first? You would have to be angry in order to be able to stop being angry. So I have seen some people in the New Thought movement that they deny their anger, they suppress it, and move on to this type of cheap forgiveness, which is in fact the act of not confronting our own negativity, what psychoanalyst Carl Jung called our shadow, the shadow side. So I have seen often that in this type of New Thought movement, we do not want to go there. We say, no, we just accept love, we just accept forgiveness, and we're not going to even look at anger, we're not going to look at pain, and we're just going to go on and forgive. And there was a movie, if you remember, it was about 2 decades ago, it was called The Prince of Tides, with Barbara Streisand and Nick Nolte, where they were actually dealing with the issues that he had and that his sister had as a consequence of the traumatic experience they were forbidden to talk about. And the truth is, the suffering of a person is often uncomfortable for others. So when a person denies their own shadow, their own negative emotion, this emotion has been defined in the book Conversations with God as energy in motion. They have to go somewhere, this energy has to go somewhere. And it often manifests as mental or emotional malaise and sometimes physical illness. This is what is called the process of somatization. When the shooting happened at the Tennessee Valley Unitarian Universalist Church in 2008, I have made a mental list of the people who were most affected by the event. And I was surprised when I heard one of these people identify himself as one of the people who had been least affected by the event. Now, he considered he was very little affected by the event because he didn't have strong feelings about it. And I had put him on my mental list of people who were most affected because he suffered a great illness shortly after it happened. And what often happens is if we do not look at our shadow side, if we do not process our fears, if we do not get healing for the things that happen to us, then it goes to the body. So, as the date approached for this lecture, I still didn't have a good conclusion because I had already said there were some flaws in my previous conclusions because of this denial of the shadow side. And so how do you forgive when the person who has caused the pain or is unrepentant or even proud is not asking for forgiveness? And the answer came to me in a song while watching a Latin soap opera. Now, don't think I watch soap operas for any other reason than I want to not forget my original language. Well, actually, Latin soap operas, they last about 6 months or a year. They always have a happy ending. There's not this, the American soap operas, they go on and on for years and years, and there's never really a happy ending. Well, Latin soap operas are not like that. They have a short duration. There's only been 2 exceptions where there was not a happy ending, I think. People were very unhappy. So, but before I tell you about the Latin soap opera, I'd like to tell you a story about Mother Teresa and a singer called Facundo Cabral. Facundo Cabral was a singer from Argentina who grew up dirt poor. He became a thief and ended up in a reformatory. Then he got out of the reformatory and started living in the streets and getting into trouble again. And he met a person who exposed him to the kind of knowledge that we share here at the Positive Living Center of Knoxville. And he started changing his life around. He found that he was a pretty good composer, had a very decent voice, and he walked into a studio one day and said, "I'm here to record an LP back then, right? Remember LPs?" And they told him, "Well, do you have an appointment?" He said, "No." And, "Well, do you know anybody here?" And he said, "No. But how am I ever going to record an LP if you don't give me the chance?" And then they were about to pull security and throw him out when the famous artist that was going to record that afternoon called and said he had a sore throat. So as a joke, they said, "Okay, come on in and play some songs for us." And by that night, they had checked him in a luxury hotel and went to pick him up really early with a contract to sign him on. And he became very famous. because of all the turmoil in his early life, he didn't get married until he was 40 years old. And he fell in love instantly with this woman. They had a little girl, and one day they were killed in an airplane accident. And he was destroyed. His whole life had been torn. And he was friends with Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa called him a few days later. And she said, "I heard you have a problem." And he started saying expletives and all sorts of things. What kind of an understatement is this? And she said, no, the problem is not what has happened. The problem is that you have all this love and you don't know where to put it. And that's what hurts and that's what's painful. So she invited the singer Facundo Cabral to come live with her 6 months in India and help her in one of the hospitals. And by giving his love, all this tremendous love he had for his wife and children to these strangers who were in need, in about 6 months he was able to heal and continue on with his life and composing these beautiful things about gratitude towards life. But going back to the soap opera. In the soap opera, there's a singer by trade who discovers he has a 10-year-old son. And originally he says, "That cannot be my son, and I'm not going to take a paternity test." And then he listens to the child sing, and then he realizes those have to be his genes because he sings beautifully. And this child is not just, it seems he didn't just inherit the voice of the father, but also the attitude. And he has a lot of charm, and he gets in trouble constantly, and then gets out of trouble using his charm. So after he does something particularly terrible, and the father is really angry at him, he sings to him a song that a man sings to his father. I grew up listening to this song. There's not a time in my life when I don't remember not having listened to this song. And of course it's in Spanish. But it is the song of a young man who starts seeing how his father is aging, and how now he's walking a little bit slower, and his thinking is not as fast, and how this once mighty, powerful father, the hero of his life, is now becoming a frail person who needs him. And the song says, "My old man, I am your blood, I am your silence, and your time, my dad, my dear dad." And when I was a little girl, everybody loved the song. And I remember that I would imagine myself that as an adult, one day I would dedicate this song to my father, because my father really was my hero. Everything he did, he seemed to me that really he was Superman and my dad, they were in the same box. And I imagined that I would look at him when I was an adult with such tender eyes. And then the unthinkable happened. Over a decade of vice and drinking and just a very disorganized life, my father couldn't keep it together anymore, and he sort of collapsed morally, and he started being very abusive with us. And this enormous love I felt for my father suddenly was turned into this abysmal fear. So when I became an adult, I sought healing and therapies and addressed issues of resentment and forgiveness towards my father with great success, several times. It happened, that I thought I had dealt with all of it, and then a few years later there was another layer, and then a few years later another layer. And every time it seems that I was going into a new stage of life, there was another layer of forgiveness to address. And then came one of my biggest breakthroughs, which was I was bit by a mosquito. Now, it's not the only time I was bit by a mosquito, but because I have a long time grudge with mosquitoes, decades long. But I think it's a cruel and designed life that you cannot feel the mosquito snout as it goes in, you can only feel it as it leaves. So you actually get to see the sucker flying away happily and with a full stomach. And I have tried numerous times to slap it, and never had success, and I feel so angry. Now I had to deal with this thing, right? But there was this one time when I actually slapped the mosquito and it became pulp. Nothing was left of the mosquito. And I felt such satisfaction that, yes, it bit me, but I got it. You know what? The fact that the mosquito was dead did not accelerate the healing of the bite at all. It took the same time, It itched the same, it hurt the same. So that experience, with the mosquito gave me the sense that it is not, forgiveness has very little to do with the other person. It's not what the other person did or tries to continue to do. It's the hurt, like the mosquito toxins, right, that was left to you that you have to deal with. And even though it might, I am not guilty for having a mosquito bite me, right? But the mosquito's gone, whether it flew away or whether it died. It is my responsibility to deal with what was left behind. And, Einstein said that problems cannot be solved at the same level of consciousness in which they were created. And this quote came to my mind as I was listening to this song in the soap opera, because this is what happened. I realized that with all my work on forgiveness, I was trying to resolve a problem at the same level at which it was created. Because you have the offense and then the need for forgiveness. They live on the same floor of this building with whole life. So they're like the two sides of the same coin. And I was trying to resolve my feelings of resentment and anger by addressing forgiveness and never being able to get to the next level. Because the problem is not what my father did, and the problem is not how I reacted to what he did. The real problem is that my father, who by the way is an unrepentant offender, made it impossible for me to express towards him the love that is my nature. Because when I was listening to this song, I was trying to resonate with it. I was looking at this moving scene in the soap opera of the child connecting with his father, and I was searching in the files in my mind. I was searching for similar events so that I could resonate with this. And the search came back with no file found. So it is like the story of Facundo Cabral and Mother Teresa, what she told him. Really what you're feeling, the resentment or the need to forgive, they're really the pain that you feel when you are not able to express love. So, just like Mother Teresa told her friend, the pain was not in the loss per se, the pain was in being loved and in having love and not having a place to deposit this love. Because every child wants to love their parents, right? Every person wants to love their friends, their partner, their children, and co-workers. So when somebody makes it impossible to us to deposit our love in them, that is the great pain that we feel. There's in Unity, there's an author called Emmett Fox, and he wrote this little tiny booklet that I recommend, and I really recommend that everybody get. And it's called The Golden Key. And basically the premise of the Golden Key is whenever you have a problem, it doesn't matter what kind of a problem it is, do not think about the problem, think about God. Because the more you think about the problem, the more you lower your vibration, your frequency. But when you think about God, you raise your frequency, and it is in this higher frequency that you can find the solutions to any problem. So by thinking about God, the solution will come to you, and sometimes the problem will be resolved on its own. And so as I was saying, I have come to the conclusion that resentment is actually the pain that we feel when someone that has become important in our life refuses to accept our love or makes it impossible for us to flow in love. And that forgiveness is not actually the forgiveness, but it's transcending grudges and forgiveness at the same time, is the freedom we feel when we finally are able to flow love to the person, or when we accept that it is that person's free will not to accept our love, and we put our attention on the people in our present who are willing to love. Freedom comes when we also accept reality. We may stop being angry with somebody for what they did, but that doesn't mean that we condone their actions, or that we shouldn't stop them from hurting others if that is in our power. Also, freedom from resentment and freedom from the need to forgive doesn't mean that we trust the person again, or that we do not expect them to make amends before we can allow them back in our circle and show trust. And now I'm going to share with you guys, there's actually a science of mind treatment for transcending this dichotomy of offense and forgiveness. So if you close your eyes, and ideally you would not be crossing your legs, but that's up to you. And take a couple of deep breaths. So this is a beautiful treatment for forgiveness by Ernest Holmes, found in Living the Science of Mind. God is all there is. God is love. Love is the motivating power of the whole universe. God is in everything. God is in everyone. Realizing that love is the great motivating power of life and knowing that God must be at the center of everything, today I am meeting this God in everyone and seeing the manifestation of His life in everything. If there is any condemnation or animosity in me, I gladly lose it. I lose it and let it go as I turn to that silent presence within me, which gives all and withholds nothing. I enter into the harmony of eternal peace, into the joy of knowing that I am now in the kingdom of God, from which no person is excluded. My yesterdays are gone forever. My tomorrows stretch forth into an endless future of pure delight. And from out of the invisible there comes to me these words, today thou art with me in paradise. And so it is. So I'm almost done. I just wanted to share with you something that is the opposite of voodoo. Like, like I said before, I do Feng Shui. And you know how in voodoo people will take a picture of the person and put it on some and then do hurtful things to the picture with the hope of hurting that person. And what ends up happening is that hatred, people send out boomerangs back and hits them. And so do the opposite. If you feel there's a person that you greatly need to forgive in your life, get a picture of them, and if you don't have a picture of them, just write down their name. And put it in a frame that is in the shape of a heart. This should be on sale now. Or just put it in any frame and put little hearts around it. If it feels too hurtful to you to have a picture of that person, have it reduced. Make it as little as you need to feel safe. And then add all things of loving things on top of that. And this actually happens, that the love that you are flowing out will also boomerang back and hit you. And that would be a good thing. Thank you.